Number 9. Sleeping Beauty. Not quite the Disney princess you're familiar with, but Frances Artsentev would go on to become the princess of Mount Everest, metaphorically speaking at least. Before attempting the dangerous ascent to the top of the world, Frances and her husband, Sergei, conquered many Russian peaks to gain mountaineering experience. During this time, she even became the first woman from the United States to ski down Mount Elbrus, the highest point in Russia. While building their strength climbing in Russia, Frances started growing an interest in being the first woman to reach Everest's summit without using additional oxygen supplies. Sounds a little sketchy already, but okay. On May 17, 1998, Frances and her husband finally set out with hopes of reaching the top of the tallest mountain in the world. After just 2 days of climbing, they reached the Camp 6 site at 26,903 feet from the ground. Radio messages from the day indicate that the pair were still doing fine on May 20th and were set to continue their journey. Unfortunately, this is when the strength of the mountain started to get the better of them. Their headlamps failed to work, and they were forced to turn around and stay multiple nights at Camp 6. Soon after, Frances and Sergei were separated. Sergei was able to reach camp again, but after finding out his wife wasn't as lucky, he headed out to search for her. Several days later, his ice axe and rope were discovered, but his body was never seen again. Frances, on the other hand, was found in a state of oxygen deprivation and frostbite by Uzbek climbers who did everything they could to help her. Sadly, it was too much for them to carry her back to camp. The next day, on May 24th, her body was discovered still clinging onto the guide rope. Her body remained visible on the icy mountainside for 9 years, and climbers gave her the nickname of Sleeping Beauty. Number 8. Maurice Wilson. While Frances Artsentev believed in her own physical strength to get her to Everest's peak, our next climber had a little more faith in higher powers. Maurice Wilson was a World War I veteran and captain in the British Army. An untimely machine gun accident made his military career come to an unexpected close. He went on to have odd jobs until becoming overcome by sickness in the 1930s. He claims his illness ended after 35 days of non-stop prayer and fasting, and credits his Christian faith for helping him to a miraculous recovery. In fact, Wilson's faith was so strong that he wanted to prove to the world anything was possible if you just believed. He became inspired by British newspaper clippings showing Everest expeditions and decided this was the perfect opportunity to show his faith in action. Despite having absolutely zero mountain climbing experience, past injuries, and being 36 years old, not exactly in his prime anymore, Wilson hatched a plan to fly a small airplane, crash land onto one of Everest's upper slopes, and simply walk to the top from there. Yeah, sounds like a foolproof plan. What could go wrong? As you could probably guess, this plan did not go well. Not at all. Wilson ran out of gas before even making it to Nepal, so he had to make the journey on foot. He tried scaling the mountain once, only to be overtaken by his lack of experience. His biggest mistake came when he didn't take the hint the first time and tried the ascent once more. Not much is known about Wilson's death on the mountain. His body was discovered in 1935, 2 years after his journey, and his diary was found close by. His last entry read, "Off again, gorgeous day." At the very least, it seems he kept his faith until the end. Number 7, 2014 Fall Avalanche. Have you ever wondered what the most dangerous job in the world is? What about one that requires you to continuously climb Everest's deadly slopes? Well, that's exactly what Sherpas do. A Sherpa works as a guide of sorts for tourist climbers to help carry supplies and lead them to the top of the mountain. Sadly, due to the nature of the job, many Sherpas end up losing their lives while working. In 2014, disaster struck. At 6:45 in the morning, an ice avalanche started raining down on unsuspecting climbers and their Sherpas. Most people think of avalanches as tons of powdery snow rushing down and clearing out everything in its path. This one, on the other hand, had less powdery snow and more giant ice shards. The floe was estimated to be 113 feet thick, with ice weighing over 31 million pounds. There were 16 casualties from the accident, 13 of which were discovered within 48 hours, with the others being found later, since the scene was deemed too risky to continue the search. Of the victims discovered, none were foreigners, most being Sherpas just trying to do their job. Interestingly enough, the movie Everest from 2015 was being filmed near the site of the avalanche, yet none of the crew or actors were injured. This is just another example of Everest's tough conditions. Even those who regularly work on the slopes fall victim to its severity. Have you ever seen the Everest movie? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Deadly overcrowding. With Everest being the highest point on the planet, it's no wonder the mountain has gained so much fame and attention. Being just over 29,000 feet tall, about the same height airplanes travel, thrill seekers and adrenaline junkies from all over the world gather to try and conquer the giant. But it's severely underestimated just how many people actually attempt the journey. 2019 yielded one of the deadliest climbing seasons in its history, with at least 11 recorded deaths. Those who made the climb and survived that year recount their experiences. Ed Doring was shocked to discover the truth behind Everest after dreaming his whole life of reaching the summit. He talks about how his group had to climb over top the dead bodies of fellow climbers. It was like a zoo, he said. Unlike the 2014 incident, natural disasters weren't to blame for these deaths. They were said to mainly be caused by too many inexperienced climbers. Some even caused by people having to wait in lines around the last 1,000 feet of the trek and running out of oxygen as a result. Hopefully officials will learn from these avoidable deaths and put more regulations in place so the climb is as safe as it possibly could be, 5.5 miles above sea level. Number 5. David Sharp. If you haven't realized by now, Mount Everest isn't exactly rainbows and lollipops. It's a dangerous, freezing cold, rocky trek that even the most experienced mountaineers struggle with. These conditions make it so that after a certain point in elevation, if something happens to you, there's not really anyone who can just come to the rescue. Which is exactly what happened to our next entry, David Sharp. Sharp had made the journey up Everest twice before his last climb. On his first trip, he even lost a few of his toes due to frostbite. On his second trip, once again, he got frostbite, but this time it was on his fingers. You'd think he'd start to catch on, but no. He decided that his last trip in 2006 would be a solo one. This decision turned out to be deadly, as Sharp died due to harsh weather conditions and extreme cold exhaustion. The true tragedy was uncovered since it is estimated that over 40 climbers passed Sharp. They claimed to do this because they thought he was beyond help or already dead. Although Mark Inglis and his party of climbers found Sharp while he was still alive, just in a state of hypothermia. They asked for help on what was best to do for Sharp in his current condition, but ultimately, they were unable to help him. It truly is survival of the fittest. On the icy peaks of Mount Everest, every man must fend for themselves. Number 4. Astronaut on Everest. At 29,000 feet, Mount Everest is as close to the stars as you can get. While still on Earth, that is. Which is exactly what astronomer and space scientist Carl Gordon Hennies thought when he was looking for somewhere to test equipment for NASA. Carl was more than just an astronomer. At the age of 38, he became an astronaut and completed 126 orbits around Earth aboard the STS-51F Challenger. This trip logged about 190 hours, or 7.9 days, total in space. After completing one of his lifelong dreams of space travel, he retired from being an astronaut and accepted a spot as the senior scientist for the Space Sciences branch at NASA. His work here mainly focused on studying space debris and possible dangers to space situations. Oddly enough, this work led him on his journey to Everest. In order to test the Tissue Equivalent Proportional Counter, TEPC for short, Carl decided to make the trek to Everest summit. The TEPC was intended to test how human bodies were affected by radiation, crucial for the planning of long-term space missions. Carl planned to test the device at various elevations of 17,000, 19,000, and 21,000 feet. Sadly, on his team's trip up, he started reporting breathing issues around 22,000 feet. Oxygen treatments failed, causing him and his team to return to base camp. He died later that night in his sleep due to high-altitude pulmonary edema. At the ripe age of 66, Carl went down in history as being the first astronaut to attempt Mount Everest's deadly climb. Although he wasn't successful, we still think his story deserves to live on in fame. Number 3, Maria Stridem. This story looks at a strong-willed and determined 34-year-old Maria Stridem. Similar to Maurice Wilson, Maria had a lot of faith in her abilities, particularly in the power she believed she got from being vegan. She was a strong advocate for the vegan lifestyle and wanted to prove to everyone that being a vegan didn't mean you couldn't tackle tough physical challenges. She just so happened to pick probably one of the hardest physical feats on Earth to try and prove her point, which, as you can likely guess, since she ended up on our list, didn't turn out that well. She made the journey with her husband, Robert Grapple. After reaching the 26,247 feet point, they entered into what is called the dead zone. If anyone stays in this part of the mountain for longer than 16 hours at a time, they are most likely to end up as one of the many bodies strewn around the slopes. Maria started to feel the effects of the elevation, and with Everest's summit a mere 15 minutes away, she felt she couldn't continue. The couple simply thought she was exhausted from climbing, so her husband asked if he could continue on since the peak was just so close. He reached the top but didn't feel the same satisfaction he would if his partner had been there. On their way back down, Maria's condition kept getting worse and worse, and on the night of May 20th, 2016, she died in her husband's arms, proving yet again that Everest is not the place to go and prove a point. Number 2, green boots. Our next story is actually connected to David Sharp. Before Sharp's untimely passing, he spent time in the cave of the most famous body on Mount Everest, nicknamed Green Boots. Green Boots is one of over 200 bodies thought to be on Everest, left mummified by the freezing temperatures. Some of these include Sleeping Beauty, who we discussed before, and more bodies found in a spot just below the summit, coined the Rainbow Valley. The name comes from all the brightly colored and neon climbing equipment worn by the corpses. Green Boots' name comes from, you guessed it, his boots. With that color, they're hard to miss. The neon green shoes acted as a landmark to all the mountaineers passing through the northern route to the top for many years. Not much is actually known about the identity of Green Boots. Unofficially, he is believed to be Toisang Pajor, an Indian climber who lost his life on Everest back in 1996. Whoever it is, though, their body remained on the mountain for decades after their death. The body was reported to be buried back in May of 2014, but others claim to have seen the infamous corpse as late as 2017. Talk about being frozen in time. Number 1, Marco Sofretti. This last climber took one look at how brutal Everest can be and said, "How could I make that more extreme?" Well, just wait, because he accomplishes exactly that. Marco Sofretti was obsessed with skiing and snowboarding from a young age. Being born with mountains in his backyard, he was raised on the kind of skiing where one mistake could mean certain death. Yet he kept on skiing, fully knowing the risks involved. As he grew older, Marco tackled many different mountains in France, snowboarding down peak after peak. He went from Aiguille du Midi at 3,281 feet high with a 55-degree incline to Dejor Lakpa in Nepal at 22,926 feet. But it wasn't enough. From the top of Lakpa, Marco could see Everest in the distance and set his sights on being the first to snowboard down the tallest mountain in the world. In order to tackle this feat, he contacted Russell Bryce, a guide for Himalayan expeditions, to get his expert opinion. Bryce told Marco that he should attempt other peaks, around 8,000 meters first, before Everest, just to see how his body could handle such extreme heights. After listening to this advice, Marco continued his downward successes and rode down Chao Oyu at 26,900 feet and Huayna Patoisi at 26,247 feet in Bolivia. Full of excitement from these two massive successes, he decided to go straight for Everest. On May 23, 2001, one day after Marco's 22nd birthday, he reached the top of Everest. He managed to ride 5,909 feet down on slopes angled at 45 degrees. Almost 4 hours after reaching the summit, he arrived back at the advanced base camp. His journey went down in history as the first continuous snowboard descent of Mount Everest. Crazy, right? What's even crazier is that he tried it again. Only this time, he wasn't as lucky. He made the ascent for the second time on September 8, 2002. After climbing for over 12 hours straight, already in a state of exhaustion, Marco reached the top and began his snowboarding journey back down. Mysteriously, no one knows what happened to Sofretti after this day. He disappeared and is thought to have succumbed to the deadly mountain conditions. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these stories? Did you learn anything new about the dangers of Mount Everest? Would you ever try climbing to the top? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.